My name is Stephen Deaton, and welcome to the Law of the Lord podcast, a production of the Newton Church of Christ in Newton, North Carolina. The aim of this podcast is to study God's Word for a deeper understanding and to see how it applies in our lives. Thank you for listening. We encourage you to search the Bible to see whether or not we are speaking the truth, because the Bible is the truth. It is the law of the Lord. Listen to this and other episodes of our podcast. Watch our class and sermon videos on our website, lawoftheLord.com. Test what we teach by God's Word and challenge us anywhere you believe we have missed the mark. In this episode, we look at Elisha the prophet and his interaction with a woman from Shunem. We note how she blessed him, and he in turn brought many blessings into her life. Her faith and service to the prophet is a worthy example in and of itself, but there are also other lessons to be learned from her life and God's working on her behalf. Before we get into the study, though, please hit the subscribe button to be notified of new episodes. Now let's study the law of the Lord together. In 2 Kings chapter 8, verses 4 through 6, we read of a woman from Shunem who is seeking help from the king. It says there, "Then the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, 'Tell me, please, all the great things Elisha has done.' Now it happened, as he was telling the king how he had restored the dead to life, that there was the woman whose son he had restored to life, appealing to the king for her house and her land. And Gehazi said, 'My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life.' And when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed a certain officer for her, saying, 'Restore all that was hers and all the proceeds from the field from the day that she left the land until now.'" It doesn't mention in those specific verses that she's from Shunem, but this is the Shunammite woman, as we're going to see as we continue to study. But a question we have is, when you read something like that, what led to this encounter with the king of Israel? Why is she there? Why is he favorable toward her? And we want to understand this woman, her life, her interactions as it relates to Elisha the prophet, and notice what great faith this woman had in God. It's interesting as you look at Elisha the prophet and Elijah the prophet as well, his mentor, how that there were occasions we have recorded where they interacted with believing women, women who were in need, either at the time they initially interacted with them or at a later time in their life. That came about to be a blessing for them, as we're going to notice in this record here. But the thing is, they had a great blessing and impact upon those that society sometimes would set aside, would overlook, would not notice or give time or attention to. So here you see that God, through his prophet, is looking out for someone who loved and served him that would not be blessed in the same way if the Lord did not intervene on their behalf. But I hope that becomes clear as we go through this. But let's go back to 2 Kings chapter 4 now, as we read about Elisha and the Shunammite woman, how that they blessed one another. In 2 Kings chapter 4, we begin here in verse 8. It says, "Now it happened one day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a notable woman, and she persuaded him to eat some food. So it was, as often as he passed by, he would turn in there to eat some food. And as she said to her husband, 'Look now, I know that this is a holy man of God who passes by us regularly. Please let us make a small upper room on the wall, and let us put a bed for him there, and a table, and a chair, and a lampstand. So it will be whenever he comes to us, he can turn in there.'" So just setting the scene here, we see that the Shunammite ensured that Elisha had his own quarters, his own place to stay as he was in the area. She was, it says, a notable woman of Shunem. that showed kindness to him. Shunem was located in the valley of Jezreel. It would not have been terribly far away from the capital of the nation, the northern nation of Israel. And evidently, as Elisha was going about his duties and traveling maybe between the schools of prophets or various other things that he would be doing in the course of his life, he passed near this woman's land, passed through the area of Shunem. Now, this woman obviously is a wealthy woman. She had probably married well, and her husband has this household. There are servants in this household, and we're going to see that come up here in just a little bit. But she provided a meal for Elisha, and then whenever he came through the area, she continued to provide meals for him. So this is a matter of just kindness to him, to help him along the way on his journey. But then it tells us that not only did she do that, but she appealed to her husband to go further. In fact, we would argue much further. It's beyond, just some food, maybe that they were out, a meal here and there that they were out as far as, expenses or preparation time, things like that. But she said, make a small upper room on the wall. And generally, if you look at the commentators who would know much more about this than I do, but the idea is that probably this is a room on the roof of the house. And it says, let's make him something there and give him the various things that are within it. And generally, it's believed that he would have had access to it from outside, so he didn't have to pass through the house, obviously, to get to this. But he had a staircase, evidently, that he could climb up there as he was going through the area. But it says he passed through there regularly, and he went in and he found rest and comfort and privacy there. And so it was a great blessing to him in his life. Well, then we read that Elisha wants to do something for her because of this kindness. He wants to show a kindness to her. Verse 11 then. And it happened one day that he came there, and he turned into the upper room and lay down there. Then he said to Gehazi, his servant, call the Shunammite woman. When he had called her, she stood before him. And he said to him, say now to her, look, you have concern for us with all this care. What can I do for you? Do you want me to speak on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army? She answered, I dwell among my own people. So he said, what then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, actually, she has no son, and her husband is old. So he said, call her. When he had called her, she stood in the doorway. Then he said, about this time next year you shall embrace a son. And she said, no, my lord. Man of God, do not lie to your maidservant. But the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had told her. So Elisha wants to give her a blessing. And when he calls for her and he asks, can I do something for you? Is there a blessing that I can offer to you? Can I speak to the king or the commander of the army? One of the things that stands out in this account is the fact that Elisha had a very different relationship with the leaders of the nation than his mentor, Elijah. And you may wonder, well, wasn't the king an idolater? Yes, he was an idolater. Remember in our previous studies how that it said he got rid of the image that his father had made, the Asherah, but he kept practicing the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. He kept the idol at Dan, the other one at Bethel, and they worshiped Jehovah through that. There was still Baalism that was present in the land. And Elisha, in the previous chapter, 2 Kings chapter 3, expresses the fact that he didn't have a whole lot of respect, and God didn't have a lot of respect for him. But remember that Elisha did help the allied kings, the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom, in their campaign against Moab. So go back and listen to a previous episode about all that unfolded. And that may be the thing that is in the back of his mind, or that is a factor here, that he's confident he can go to the king or he can go to the commander of the army and ask a favor on behalf of this woman. So it's an interesting dynamic that's unfolding here, but she says, I don't need anything. I'm good. I dwell among my own people. Has food, clothing, and shelter. She's got marriage and a family and neighbors and perhaps extended family in that area. Her life was good. So she says, basically, I don't need anything. She goes away. Elisha is talking to his servant Gehazi. What is it that we can do for her? He really wanted to do something to show his appreciation to her. Well, Gehazi informs Elisha, she doesn't have a son, she doesn't have any children, and so he called her back and informed her, you're going to have a son. It was beyond her hope that she would have a son, that she expresses it to him as, no, my Lord. She's not saying, don't do this, I don't want this. What she's saying is, I can't believe it. You can't be serious. Don't tease me. Just don't do this. Now, it may be because of her husband and his age or other circumstances or factors in their life, but the reality is she didn't have any children. He says, about this time next year, you're going to have a child, and the text records for us that's exactly what unfolded. Now, verse 18 is where the account takes a tragic turn. It says, and the child grew. Now it happened one day that he went out to his father, to the reapers, and he said to his father, my head, my head. So he said to his servant, carry him to his mother. When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door upon him, and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and come back. So he said, why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath. And she said, it is well. Then he saddled a donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward. Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward. Do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you. So she departed and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel. So it was, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to his servant Gehazi, look, the Shunammite woman. Please run now to meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, it is well. Now when she came to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet, but Gehazi came near to push her away. But the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. So she said, did I ask a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, get yourself ready and take my staff in your hand and be on your way. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. And if anyone greets you, do not answer him, but lay my staff on the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So he arose and followed her. Now Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Therefore he went back to meet him and told him, saying, the child has not awakened. Now, let's pause for a minute and think about this, that the boy goes out to his father one day in the field, and that would be a typical and maybe a touching scene. Evidently, he's still an adolescent here. He's going out to see his father, to see the reapers, as little boys are wont to do. They're interested, they're curious. They may even want to help out in whatever capacity they're able to do that. But no doubt he loves his father. Maybe he has some affection for some of the reapers out there, a relationship with them. And he just wants to be out there sort of in the middle of everything that's going on. Well, while he's out there, though, he cries out, my head, something's going on. Is that a heat stroke? Is it an aneurysm? Is there something else going on? Of course, we're not informed with that, but it's something serious. And one of the servants had to carry him back to his mother, and he was with his mother until noon as she was taking care of him, being tender toward him. But then it says, of course, that he died. Well, it's very interesting that the mother now, we see the account just matter-of-factly takes him and lays him on the bed of the man of God. She goes to that room that had been built for him, lays the body of the child there, closes the door, goes out, goes to her husband, give me a servant, give me a donkey, I'm going to see the man of God. Her husband's confused about that. And when he asked her about that, basically, why are you going? And the New King James says, it is well. There's the idea here that one of the footnotes says, it will be well. So we don't want to interpret what the woman is saying here is an overt lie. She is simply trying to say it's going to be fine. So essentially she's saying, there's nothing here for you to worry about. I'm going to take care of it. And sometimes husbands and wives do that with each other. They just simply say the other spouse knows, okay, something's not quite right here. What's going on? And we might say, no need to worry. Everything's going to be okay. Nothing to concern you with or trouble you with. Everything's fine, when you're saying it's going to be fine. So that's what the woman's doing here, both with her husband and then, of course, when she encounters Gehazi as he's sent to meet her. But she's determined to go. She says, don't slacken the pace unless I tell you to. So she's in a hurry. We do see that she is urgent here. So she has a concern for her son and is taking action to have the situation remedied, if you will. So she goes out there. She's on her way. The man of God recognizes her. He tells Gehazi, go and meet her and ask her, is everything okay? And of course she says, all is well, or it's going to be well. She comes to the man of God. She grabs him by the feet. Gehazi believes that's inappropriate. But Elisha realizes at this point, you know what? She needs me. She's in trouble. She's in distress. God's hidden it from me. In other words, God hasn't revealed to me what's going on here. And so leave her alone. I want to know what's happening here. It shows the respect that Elisha has for this woman. He wants to help her out. Of course, he's inclined to help her out after she has been generous toward him in the relationship that they've had through the years, this friendship that has no doubt developed between the two of them. And so he tells Gehazi, after he finds out that the child has died, that you need to take my staff, go to the child, lay it on the child. Don't greet anyone, don't talk to anyone along the way, and lay it on the face of the child. And the mother is insistent, Elisha, you need to come with me. She is determined, as a mother can be determined, to ensure that her child is made well. So he agrees to go with her, and Gehazi went ahead, as the text noted. He gets the child, he lays the staff on the child, nothing happens. The child is not revived at that time. And what that helps us to see is the power was not in that staff. There's no magical ornament, instrument, physical thing. Sometimes people believe there's power in a physical object. It might be a stone, it might be a jewel, it might be some type of instrument like this staff here, an amulet of some kind, maybe some piece of jewelry or whatever. And it's showing us, no, there's no inherent power in the object itself, because nothing happens here when Gehazi takes it. And Gehazi doesn't have the power to restore this boy's life. So we go on in verse 32. It says, when Elisha came into the house, there was the child lying dead on his bed. He went in, therefore, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He returned and walked back and forth in the house, and went up again and stretched himself out on the child, on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, call this Shunammite woman. So he called her, and when she came into him, he said, pick up your son. So she went in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. So Elisha arrives and is able to revive the child, to restore the child's life. Notice that it tells us that when he got there, in verse 33, when he closed the door, he prayed to the Lord. That is where the power was. In this prophet, this man of God, in his appeal to God to restore this child's life. Now, these other things that we read about, you understand that Elisha is copying his mentor Elijah when he raised someone from the dead. So it is that the child was restored, he is presented to his mother, and it's indicating to us that she is very grateful, of course, for this, as she fell at his feet and bowed to the ground. So what a wonderful blessing that this mother received from Elisha the prophet, really from God through Elisha the prophet. Now we fast forward to where we began in 2 Kings chapter 8, but we're going to look at verse 1, what led up to her going to the king and receiving a favor from the king. So 2 Kings 8, verse 1, then Elisha spoke to the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, arise and go, you and your household, and stay wherever you can, for the Lord has called for a famine, and furthermore it will come upon the land for 7 years. So the woman arose and did according to the saying of the man of God, and she went with her household and dwelt in the land of the Philistines 7 years. It came to pass at the end of 7 years that the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went to make an appeal to the king for her house and for her land. Then the king talked with Gehazi, the servant, the man of God, saying, tell me, please, all the great things Elisha has done. Now it happened, as he was telling the king how he had restored the dead to life, that there was the woman whose son he had restored to life, appealing to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, my lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life. And when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed a certain officer for her, saying, restore all that was hers, and all the proceeds from the field, from the day that she left the land until now. So it tells us here in the opening of this account that she was warned about a famine. This is another blessing from God, that this woman would be forewarned about it so she could make arrangements that her and her household would be able to better get through this time of famine. Now, it's likely in reading this account here that her husband has passed on, and that might reflect the idea that before, a reason for her barrenness was her husband was an older man, which was not uncommon, of course, in those ancient times and in this culture. But she heeded Elisha. She and her household went away for 7 years. says she lived in the land of the Philistines, so she survived that time of famine. But while she was away, someone else took over her land. She gets back and realizes that. Well, she goes to the king to make an appeal for him to restore her land. And this is King Jehoram, the king that has been reigning for a good portion of the time that Elisha has been engaged in his work. So it tells us then, of course, that he restored her land. When she came before him, Gehazi was talking to the king because the king was curious about Elisha and all the great deeds that he did. And he just happened to be learning about this time that Elisha restored life to the dead, and that is, performed a resurrection. And in walks this woman and her son at that precise time, and Gehazi recognizes her and her son and says, "This is the one I was just telling you about." Well, it says the king asked the woman, and she told him. In other words, he asked, "Is all of this true? What about this?" And she testified to that fact. So you have Gehazi giving testimony, if you will, to the king about what he had witnessed, what he knew about Elisha and this resurrection of the dead. The woman and the son both give testimony to it here. The son is living, breathing, concrete evidence, but the mother who experienced this confirms what Gehazi had told the king. So the king is no doubt impressed about what has happened here, and he acts favorably toward her, appoints an officer to make sure she gets back not only her land, but also the proceeds, if you will, that had come from the field while she had been away. So he is being very generous to this woman. Now let's think about some lessons from this account, or these accounts, maybe we should say. Two different places, different things going on, separated by a good amount of time here between when Elisha first met her, she has the child, everything unfolds with that, and now her land being restored to her. The first lesson we want to get is the importance of hospitality and gratitude. This Shunammite woman showed great hospitality toward Elisha. She ensured that the man of God, first of all, had food on his journey. You know, to provide a meal to someone is a very kind gesture, a consideration just on the basic level of humanity, if you will, showing humanity. Someone who's traveling along, and this prophet of God who's traveling along, you know, you look at this time frame in Elisha's life and his work and his labors, you realize not everybody appreciated the prophets of God. Remember that when he was out traveling, that there were youths who came out of Bethel and made fun of him. "Go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head," and were really being pejorative toward him. And again, go back and listen to a previous episode about that. So not everybody had a respect, a kindness, a consideration for the prophet of God at this time. But this woman does, and she's being hospitable in providing not just one meal, but multiple meals as he traveled through the area. In other words, it seems like she gave him an open invitation and encouraged him to come by and get a meal as he was going through the area. No doubt, as Gehazi traveled with him, Gehazi was being fed and taken care of as well. So they're being generous here in providing for him. Well, she went further as time went by, and she realized, you know what, we can do more than this. We can provide a place for him to stop and rest and have some comfort and some privacy. So she persuaded her husband to build a sizable room. Now, it's a small room relative to their overall house and property and whatnot, but it's sizable enough for these accommodations. The bed that they're going to put in there, a table and a chair and a lampstand. So it's big enough for what we might say kind of a small studio apartment is what he has. And there's considerable effort and expense that goes into that. This woman does not seek remuneration. She's not looking to get anything out of this. This is just simply out of the kindness of her heart, showing hospitality. And her actions reflected her spiritual mindset, what she considered to be important and a priority in life. She was a godly woman interested in the Lord's work and considerate of God's servants and his need and his comforts. This is actually an example for all of us to be hospitable to God's people, especially those active in teaching the Word of God. In 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 9, Peter gives us admonition. Now, this is to all Christians, and he says this, be hospitable to one another without grumbling. Being hospitable, I don't know about in your home, but in my home and some other homes of which I'm aware, when you are hospitable, in other words, you expect people or you invite people over, there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. You clean up the house, you clean up the living area at least, even if you don't maybe clean up your bedroom, maybe you just shut the door and keep it closed and hope there's no reason for anyone to go in there. But you clean up a bathroom maybe, so if that facility is needed when people are visiting, it's available. If you have a dining room and you plan on eating in there, you're going to clean that up. So there's quite a bit that goes on. You maybe do some grocery shopping, and then you prepare the meal. You plan that out. You prepare it. That might be something that takes, 30 minutes to prepare if you're throwing some sandwiches together, or it might take several hours to prepare if you're cooking something in the oven. You have a recipe that's, involved and complicated. So hospitality takes effort, it takes forethought. And so what we want to think about is he says, be hospitable without grumbling. We don't want to complain about the need and the requirement to show hospitality toward others. Yes, it takes effort. Yes, it at times can be frustrating. Things can be frantic. Something goes wrong. Oh, you forgot a particular thing for the recipe, or you spilled something. Something goes sideways. Maybe the dog gets sick right before the people show up, and you have to take care of those things. It's just a part of life. Well, be hospitable. Show that hospitality toward one another as fellow children of God. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, remember that we're given qualifications for elders here. And it's interesting to note in verse 2, it says, a bishop must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach. See, elders, to be leaders, you need to be hospitable. Show hospitality toward others, kindness of consideration. Now, that can be having people in your home, but that can also be hospitality in other ways, that maybe you provide food for them, you go and help them out, you take care of different things. But the idea is that leaders are going to have influence and look after people within a congregation. They need to be hospitable in their life. And if you notice in 3 John, the book of 3 John, verses 5 through 7, it says this, Beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers, who have borne witness of your love before the church. If you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God, you do well, because they went forth for his name's sake, taking nothing from the Gentiles. Now, let's understand the word hospitality is not used here, but he's talking about hospitality. when he says you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God. This isn't just simply the idea of well wishes. Hey, good luck in that. It's the idea you're providing actual support to them in their work and labor. And this is where we get to that point of helping out servants of God who are actively advancing the kingdom, the teachers, the preachers of the word of God. For the Shunammite woman, it was the prophet of God, someone who had been selected by God to be a spokesperson in Old Testament times, in a time of corruption, of idolatry, and she recognized this man's value before God and to the nation, appreciated his work and labor, and did what she could to help him on his journey and his work and his labors in the things that we've discussed. And here in 3 John, John is telling Christians, do this. Do this for those that you know. In other words, you're acquainted with them, you have a relationship with them, and for those you don't know. So he's not saying stranger, just any random person, but it's talking about in the context. Verse 7 again, 3 John verse 7, they went forth for his name's sake. In other words, these are people who are laboring in the kingdom. So these are people maybe that you've never met before, but they are Christians. They're devoted to God. They're out there laboring in his kingdom to help advance the cause and to save souls. Well, you look out for them. You do that faithfully. Hebrews 13 is very similar in what it says here, verses 1 and 2. Let brotherly love continue. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing, some have unwittingly entertained angels. That idea of entertaining them is the idea of being hospitable. It's not the idea of putting on a show, a play, a concert, something like that. It's saying that you have looked after them and taken care of their physical needs. You've provided a place to stay. You've provided a meal, just like that Shunammite woman. And so it's something that the New Testament commands, directs, and encourages for Christians to do for one another, and particularly for those who are out there laboring in the kingdom. God takes note of your actions toward his servants. Now, I would like you to note that this is an excellent object lesson for Christians who want to host a preacher. Thinking about this Shunammite woman and the arrangements, the accommodations that she made. Give a preacher his own private space with all the necessary items. A lamp, a desk, a chair, a bed. Those kinds of things are so helpful to a preacher, as opposed to maybe just being put into a room where there is no space on any surface to put any of his stuff. He has to stick his suitcase maybe between the bed and the wall. He has to get it out and open it up to get his socks out. Then he has to close it up and stick it back on, the side of the bed between the bed and the wall, because there's no room for him to put his things. Too many people put a preacher in an awkward circumstance. Maybe he's stuck into the kids' room and it's decorated with, stuffed animals and toys and a toy chest, and there's junk everywhere in there. Has to have a shared bathroom with the family where he has no privacy as he's going into the bathroom and using those facilities in the morning, in the evening, or whenever it may be. The kids or the animals are intrusive into his privacy. The family maybe interrupts his study or his time of rest. Maybe it is that, the person who is hosting is a person that really likes to talk, and they dominate the time of the preacher. He's not able to relax and unwind, give time and attention that he really needs to his studies and to not only deal with the things that he's dealing with while he's there, maybe if he's visiting and he's preaching for the week, he has lessons to meditate upon, to study, to go back through and work through to be well prepared. But he also has work back home that he's probably needing to get done and take care of so that when he gets back, he's not terribly behind. Well, brethren need to think about that and giving him something that is comfortable, the accommodations that will help facilitate the work in which he is engaged. And if a preacher's not engaged in work when he's there, visiting, preaching, and things like that, and he's just there for a social occasion, then you need to invite a different preacher to come and send him home and let him socialize at home. Make that his priority if he wants to, wherever he's from. But anyways, I have much to say about that, but another day. These are things maybe for another time and place. But 2 Kings chapter 4, when this woman shows this hospitality of not just the meals, but also providing a place for him and the things that he needs to do his work and his labors. Well, Elisha is grateful for the Shunammite's generosity and wanted to do something meaningful and impactful for her, and that's why he called her to see, what is it that you need? What can I do for you? Can I help you in some way? Preachers today may not be able to speak to the president or the secretary of war on behalf of a brother or sister to get them a favor, get something done for them. But they can talk to God, and that's exactly what Elisha did and ended up doing for his benefactor. He ended up not asking the king or the captain of the army, but he ended up asking God to give this woman a son. We see in the New Testament where Paul prayed for the saints among whom he had labored and for those who had been very kind and generous toward him in different ways as he was laboring in the kingdom. And Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14, I want to read this and just notice how he is expressing this prayer on behalf of the brethren. He writes it down in this letter. He says in Ephesians 3, verse 14, "For this reason I bow my knees to the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, from whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with might through his Spirit in the inner man, that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width and length and depth and height, to know the love of Christ, which passes knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God." You think about that blessing. He is calling upon the Lord to provide to them. It's because he's grateful for them. He loves them. He appreciates them. The same is true over in the book of Philippians. In Philippians chapter 1, verse 3, "I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, make a request for you all with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ." So he's praying on their behalf. They've been very good to him. They've been kind to him. They've sent support, material help to Paul in his work, in his labors. In verse 9, he goes on to say this, "And this I pray, that your love may abound still more and more in knowledge and all discernment, that you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ, being filled with the fruits of righteousness, which are by Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God." So he's praying that they will be spiritually strong, they will grow, that their souls will be saved in the end when the Lord returns. In 3 John, verse 2, we see something similar from John. In 3 John and verse 2, he says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." Remember, He's writing to Gaius, to an individual here. So he is praying that he would prosper in all things, think material things, and be in health, so physical well-being, just as your soul prospers. So those three areas of finances, health, and spiritual well-being. He prayed that on his behalf. So you think about this, that preachers can and should show appreciation for those who are kind and generous and hospitable toward them. Very often that takes a form of a card of thanks, like if they've gone to preach somewhere for a week and people have hosted the preacher for a meal, very often preachers will send a card of thanks as well as expressing thanks while he's there, of course. And he prays for them. And sometimes it is you offer a gift to a host or hostess as they welcome you into their home, as they're taking care of you, or to different ones in various ways. I've given books to people at times and different things like that. So there's a way that preachers can show appreciation for those who have blessed them, been an encouragement to them, helped them along in their work. It's right, it's good, it's appropriate. It really is needed for preachers to do and not neglect that part of their work and labor and relationship to brethren who are spiritually minded, love the Lord, and seek to help in his work and labors. Another lesson we want to think about in this account of the Shunammite woman and what unfolds between her and Elisha and with her family is that idea that children are a blessing. She couldn't believe that she was going to be blessed with a son. It was kind of stunned her. She didn't see how it was possible when Elisha mentioned that she would have a son about this time next year. Again, was her husband too old? Was she personally past the age of childbearing, or was there something else going on? It was something obviously that she desired. It was a great blessing, and we understand that in the Bible, it's very much presented to us that children are not a curse, they're not a burden, but they are a blessing from God. In Psalm 127 and verse 3, it says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward." You see, children are a reward to men. God designed the family, right? You back all the way up to the beginning in Genesis chapter 1, where God created man, and it says this in Genesis 1:26. "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, birds of the air, over the ever living thing that moves on the earth." So God created the family. He created a man and a woman and told them to be fruitful and multiply, have children. It's a part of God's plan for creation, part of what's woven into the fabric of humanity is to have children. Now, God wants good for us. God wants things that are a blessing for us in our life. So let's understand that family is good. Family is a blessing. In Ephesians 5, remember, beginning there, verse 22, it talks about wives, submit to your husbands. Verse 25, husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church, gave himself for her. Verse 33, he winds up that section saying, "Nevertheless, let each one of you in so particular love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband." When you have that love of the husband for his wife, that respect of the wife for her husband, That's a blessing. That's good for the man and the woman in that relationship. He goes on to say in Ephesians 6, verse 1, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. The psalmist has said in Psalm 127, verse 4, that children are like arrows in a quiver. And the idea is you have these children and you can use them to do good in the world. So family is a blessing. Children are a blessing to their parents. The parents are a blessing to their children. It's emphasizing that here in Ephesians chapter 6. We need to appreciate family. Now, are there sometimes frustrations with family? Yes. Most definitely are frustrations with family. But God has given us to each other with the purpose of caring for each other and the purpose in and of itself of caring. We need that in our lives. We need to care for other people. We have people to love and to share life with. You know, so many things in life are absolutely devoid of meaning without someone else to share it with. And so family is a blessing that we can share life with. We can share the ups, the good times, the joys of life, but we can also share the burdens, the sorrows of life together. Someone who's there to help us through. So there's a blessing in children, and men and women often grow and mature by having children. There's a certain maturity, there's a certain growth in your life that you simply will not experience if you don't have children of your own. You can't have it. It just is impossible for it to be there. And children very often reflect us, and we see ourselves in them maybe, and it helps us sometimes to realize faults that we have that we need to correct, or we realize in having children and dealing with their needs and with trying to direct them in the right things in life that, you know, we need to grow up. We need to change. We need to be better people for them. Family is a blessing, even with trials and tragedies. A Shunammite woman lost her son to death. And it's a brief account, and it was a brief time, relatively speaking, between when he fell ill, when he died, and then when he was resurrected. But it doesn't mean there wasn't heartache, concern, emotions involved in that whole account. You know, our children are going to go through hardships. They may face health issues. Some of them may be minor, they may be temporary. Some of them may be very serious and ongoing. And you probably know people, or maybe you've experienced that yourself. And so there's real emotions, concern for your child in times like that. You may have concern for safety in society, at work, at school, things like that. Relationships that your children have with their friends that maybe hurt at times because those relationships fall apart, or somebody says something that is difficult for them. Maybe it is that they have a love interest, if you will, and that ends up falling apart, and it really is painful for them to go through. And you as a parent witnessing that, feel that pain with them very often. You know, our hearts are heavy with concern at times, but this reflects a love and affection. And emotions for others are good as long as they are not out of control. The Shunammite is such a great example of where, when her son died on her knees, she didn't lose control of herself. She took his body, laid it in that upper room, went to her husband, said, "Here's what I need." Told the servant, "Let's go." She got to Elisha. She expressed her emotions without losing control of herself. And then, of course, she was blessed by that. She kept her emotions in check. And we need to keep our emotions in check relative to our children and not let those just run wild. Children are a blessing, even though there are challenges that we might have by having children in our life. And they're going to be there, of course. Everyone who has children knows that. Well, another lesson we can get is God's overarching work in the lives of men. The resurrection of the Shunammite son did more than bless her and her husband. It was a blessing to them, a true blessing and a faith building that would last them a lifetime. But when you think about that second record in 2 Kings chapter 8, so you have the first record of events in her life in 2 Kings 4, and you fast forward to 2 Kings chapter 8, and you realize, wow, there's a connection between the two as it spells it out there. And this resurrection of her son was evidence for Jehoram, the king, that Elisha was a prophet of God, that he was God's spokesman. It just further confirmed for him, and whatever experiences he had had with Elisha personally or hearing about, and as Gehazi is reciting those things, helps him to realize Jehovah is at work through Elisha. And it impressed the king, and he then was favorable toward the woman when she sought for the restoration of her land. Just think about that blessing of the resurrection of her son so many years before and how it came back to be a blessing again when she was seeking favor from the king. You know, what God did years before affected her life in a positive way. She could not have known that when she offered a meal to Elisha or had a room constructed for him. She could not have known that when she gave birth to her son when he died and was resurrected. She could not have known that when she was told to go away during the famine or when she was on her way back returning to her homeland. You know, God was working in her life for many years, and it carried through those years. And God works in His providence today. Of course, we're not looking for miracles, and we've talked about that before in our study of Elisha the prophet and his life. But, that doesn't mean God is not working in this world. No, God is working in this world in what we call providence. And it's hard for us to wrap our mind around how He's doing that, but He most certainly does it. Remember Hebrews 1, verses 13 and 14? Hebrews chapter 1, as he's talking about how Christ is superior to the angels, but He was made a little lower than the angels. And he says this in Hebrews 1, verse 13, "But to which of the angels has He ever said, 'Sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool'? Are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister for those who will inherit salvation?" See, he's talking about angels are serving the children of God. And it's not in a miraculous way. So they're working on our behalf. It's difficult to understand it. It's a challenge for us to wrap our mind around it. But if you've lived very long, you can see the providence of God in your life. A difficult time now may turn out as a source of strength and blessing many years later. Think of Joseph, right? Joseph being sold into slavery and then thrown into prison, only to become the viceroy of Egypt, a very powerful, very wealthy man who then was able to rescue his family, deliver them from the famine that had befallen upon the earth at that time. Think of Esther. She was orphaned as a small child, only to become queen for the king of Persia. So you see, there are things we may go through that are painful, hard, difficult now that can very well be a tremendous blessing in the future. And that's something God's working out in His providence. So we need to have faith in Him as the Shunammite woman did, as she kept control of herself, as she went forward, as she went to seek the help of the man of God. We need to have that kind of faith that when tragedy strikes, we don't fall apart, but we trust in the providence of God because God is at work in our lives today. So as we wrap up this study, let's think about this, that the kind generosity of a woman who simply wanted to make life a little better for a servant of God was blessed time and again by the Lord. She was not seeking the blessing in and of itself. She wasn't seeking to get something out of the man of God. That wasn't her aim or goal. She did not have a selfish motive in this, but she was spiritually minded and sought to do what she could in support of Jehovah and His people. Our faith and dedication, our love and service to the Lord and His people is recognized by the Lord. We may do something small, while the Lord often grants us astounding blessings. He also blesses us time and again in ways that far outweigh any sacrifice we make for Him. Above all, think about this. Above all, He sent His Son to die for us. We are totally undeserving of the Son's sacrifice, yet God loved us so much that He created and executed the plan of salvation. He simply asks us to give ourselves to Him, to humble ourselves before Him, and to do His will. To do His will. This is a blessing far above anything we could hope for. That redemption, that salvation, that gift of eternal life that He says is ours if we come to Him and serve Him. And we need to show our appreciation for it each and every day. Thank you for listening to the Law of the Lord podcast, a work of the Newton Church of Christ in Newton, North Carolina. We are a congregation that seeks to follow the New Testament as our rule of faith and practice, not following the latest trends of man, but submitting to the Lord's commands. We are different from any denomination or flashy community church. Find out more about us on our website, lawoftheLord.com. We invite you to challenge us about our beliefs and practices. Ask us tough questions and insist on a Bible answer. If we cannot give book, chapter, and verse for what we believe and what we do, we will change. Reach out to us with any questions or comments about this episode. We also welcome Bible questions that we can answer personally for you or address in a future episode. We look forward to hearing from you.